At some point in a career crossroads, every person comes to the same question. And the question is, so what do I do now? Not in theory, not in reflection only, but in real life. How do I actually make a decision? And here's where a lot of people go wrong. The pressure to decide gets strong, and people often slip into this way of deciding. They ask, what looks impressive? Or what would be safest? Or what would make the most sense on paper? And those aren't irrelevant questions, but if that's the only level on which a person decides, they may end up right back where they started, successful on paper, unfulfilled inside. Because a career crossroad is not only asking for a decision, it's asking for a different way of deciding. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. What it means to make a purpose aligned decision, and why that kind of decision is different from a merely strategic one, and how a person can begin deciding from their deeper self instead of deciding only from pressure, fear, or external expectation. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listening into the podcast. I appreciate you. I can't say it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you haven't done it already, please follow the podcast, subscribe, rate, and review to help us keep it going. And because you've been doing that, we have been ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So for those of us who haven't done that, go ahead and do that and join the others. All right. So now, as you may know, this is the space where we talk about leadership, purpose, identity, and the deeper questions that thoughtful people encounter as their careers evolve. And we're in the midst of a series where I've been doing solo episodes, and we're building toward this moment. We started by naming the reality of the career crossroads, and we talked about why crossroads are not random. And we went all the way up until last week's episode, Why Values Reveal What Matters Most. And today, I want to bring all that we've done in this series together, bring those threads together to get to this point. Because at some point, reflection has to become a decision. So we've done all this inner work and reflection, and now that has to come to a decision. Not a rushed decision and not a pressured decision, but a true to you decision. A purpose aligned decision is not just a decision that sounds inspiring. It's a decision filtered through a deeper understanding of who you are. It's a decision that reflects your truest self more than your old conditioning. And that changes everything. And I want to talk about why people still make career crossroads decisions in an old way and not this way that I'm talking about. Because even after a person starts seeing themselves more clearly, there's still a strong pull to decide the old way. And by old way, I mean from external logic first, from fear first, from urgency first, from pressure first. And that pull is real because big decisions can feel vulnerable. They bring up questions like, what if I decide wrong? What if I disappoint people? What if I lose security? So, in that vulnerable moment, many people look for something solid to grab onto: a title, a salary, a safer path, a more explainable story. And again, those things are not meaningless, but they can become substitutes for a deeper inner truth. That's why it's possible to do inner work and all the things we've been talking about in the recent episodes and still decide in a way that abandons it. Because pressure has a way of shrinking people back down to the decision that's easiest to defend to others. A purpose aligned decision, however, requires more insight. It requires courage, the courage to let what is true have real authority in the decision. So you may be saying, well, all right, what is a purpose aligned decision? So let me define it. A purpose aligned decision is a decision made from the deeper inner truth of who you are, what matters to you, how you are naturally wired, and the kind of contribution that feels meaningful for you to make. It's not a perfect decision. It's not a risk-free decision. And quite frankly, it's not always the easiest decision, but it's the truest to you decision. So a purpose aligned decision does not ask only, what can I do? It asks, what fits who I really am now? What honors what matters most to me? What reflects my natural abilities and design more than my old conditioning? And it asks, what feels true enough that I can live with the cost of it? And that last question matters a lot because at a career crossroads, every decision may involve some cost, but not every decision carries the same kind of internal cost. A purpose aligned decision helps a person distinguish between a hard cost they can live with and a misaligned cost that will keep wearing them down. And there's wisdom in that thinking. So identity must come before opportunity. So that's one of the most important things to understand is that a purpose aligned decision does not begin with the option, the choice, or decision. It begins with the self. That's the difference. The old way starts here. It says, here are my options. Which one is best? A person choosing from deeper alignment starts here. Who am I now? And which decision best reflects that? That's a very different posture because when identity comes first, opportunity gets filtered differently. Now, the question is not merely whether an opportunity is good, is whether it is good for the truth of who you are in this season. Not whether it's impressive, whether it's aligned. Not whether it's the easiest to explain, whether it's true to who you are. That's why two people can look at the same opportunity and need very different answers. The right decision is not floating out there in the abstract. It has to be filtered through the self, through the you who will live it. So now I want to make this practical. When I think about a purpose aligned decision, I think about it moving through inner filters, not in a rigid way, but in a deeply true to you way, a way that asks, does this reflect what is true about who I am now? Does this fit my deeper values, not just my external goals? Does this honor my natural abilities, not just the skills I have learned to perform? That's a very different decision-making process than simply weighing pros and cons. It's not irrational. It's more true to who you are because it brings your whole self into the decision, not just the resume, not just the fear, not just the optics. But purpose aligned does not always mean comfortable. That's important. A purpose aligned decision is not always the most comfortable decision. It may actually scare you. It may stretch you. It may still require loss, uncertainty, or courage. And that's why some people miss it because they assume that if a decision is aligned, it should feel easy. Not necessarily. Sometimes an aligned decision feels deeply right and deeply costly at the same time, true and vulnerable at the same time, relieving and stretching at the same time. And that doesn't make it wrong. It simply means truth and comfort are not always identical. So when a decision feels scary, the question is not automatically, is this wrong? The better question may be, is this fear because it is untrue or because it is true and requires courage? That's a different kind of discernment. Now, let me say a word about the difference between fear and truth. At a career crossroad, fear always speaks, and that's normal. The question is not whether fear shows up. The question is whether fear gets to lead. Fear says, choose what is easiest to explain. Choose what keeps everyone comfortable. Choose what feels most familiar. That's what fear says. But truth speaks differently. Truth says, choose what honors what matters most to you. Choose what allows you to stay closer to who you really are, to your true self. Choose what reflects the person you are now, not only the person you have been. Fear is often loud, urgent, and convincing. Truth is often quieter, steadier, and deeper. That's why a person has to slow down enough to hear it. So before we close the episode today, I want to leave you with a few questions. What kind of decision would reflect the deepest truth of who you are now? What option feels most aligned, not just most explainable? And where are you tempted to decide from fear, image, or pressure instead of your inner truth? And what would it look like to choose not just a path, but a way of deciding that keeps you closer to yourself? Sometimes the most important breakthrough at a career crossroad is not just finding the next answer, it is becoming the kind of person who decides from an inner truth. So, in our next episode, we're going to talk about what happens after the decision because making a purpose aligned decision is powerful, but it's not the end of the work. The next question becomes, how do I keep living from that truth once life, work, career gets noisy again? How do I keep returning to myself when the fear, pressure, or momentum try to pull me away? That's what we're going to explore next. So, if you are at a career crossroads, I want to leave you with this. The goal is not just to make a decision. The goal is to make a decision that reflects who you really are. And that's a different kind of a decision, a steadier one, a truer one, a purpose aligned one. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin. And if this conversation resonated with you, be sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss the next episode in this series. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.